if you pick one of the revenue streams and just do that really well, you could just ignore the other ones. So especially if it's a digital product. So I would encourage people, don't get bogged down like, oh, I have to diversify with, especially if you look at success stories on the learning platforms that are out there like Teachable or Kajabi or whatever. Like if you do a good job, like you don't need to worry about any of the other streams of income. Because I do have a podcast and YouTube, there's the occasional ad placement. So I typically don't use AdSense. It's a really horrible way to monetize depending on your industry. Mine, where essentially I'm talking about the making money online area or personal finance, those are not paying out what I consider good. It's probably much higher because it's business focused and finance focused. It's probably higher than like a general audience.
Hi, and welcome. This is Road to Revenue. I'm your host, Lee, and joining us today, we have Doug Cunnington. We're going to go into a little bit more about the trials, the tribulations, and some of those twists and turns on his road to revenue. Doug, welcome to the podcast.
Lee, it is a pleasure to meet you, and thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to, talk about myself for a little while here, but share some stories. And yeah, thanks again.
Excellent. So can we start off by telling us a little bit more about what it is that you do?
I've simplified the answer over time, but we'll get into the details. I have a media company where I have essentially a few blogs, a couple of podcasts, and a couple of YouTube channels. And the whole thing started with a blog back in 2013. I started Niche Site Project where I talked about affiliate marketing and SEO. And slowly over time, I've added different layers. Along the journey, I got laid off from my full-time job and that sort of thing. But right now, the main focus is mostly creating podcast and YouTube. I like the audio and video format. I'm not blogging so much these days and have slowly shifted from affiliate marketing and SEO to more personal brand and content creation type content, which is more interesting. And again, as my passions, my interests have shifted, I've changed what I'm working on to keep it interesting for me.
Tell us about that first step. So like the road to revenue obviously starts with that first step. What was yours? Like, what was it like? Tell us a little bit more around what prompted you to sit in front of the keyboard and actually make a move into the digital space.
I had a corporate worker bee type job. I was a project manager at a consulting company, and I really didn't like it. I think there were times when I really hated it, but I was on the corporate ladder, and I was kind of looking ahead and seeing my supervisors, the people that were 10 or 15 years ahead of me, and I realized that I didn't really want to be where they were at. They were kind of doing the same thing as me, which I already didn't like. And I didn't really do anything with it. I mean, I'm complacent like most people. I wasn't super unhappy. I was in that uncomfortable zone, but it wasn't so bad that I had to do something, and I wasn't a top performer as some of my friends were at those companies. So anyway, I accidentally found Smart Passive Income, the podcast with Pat Flynn, and it sounded like a scam when I first heard some of the things he was saying, but after a while I got hooked. I actually started a blog in 2013, probably 4 to 6 weeks after listening to the first episode. And I listened to like everything he had published and read his blog, really got obsessed like many people. The first probably 3 or 4 things that I tried, complete train wreck. It didn't work out, but I learned something along the way. It just like it is now, it's relatively inexpensive to try to start a blog or a YouTube channel or a podcast. You can get started. The hard part is knowing that you're going to fail and continuing to push through. So those were some of the first steps. And I heard a lot of people talk about failing fast so that you could shorten the learning curve and really just kind of execute to learn on the job, so to speak. That worked really well for me, and I didn't get too bogged down for any of the specific failures. So within 6 months or so, I had great success with Amazon affiliate And I think within 6 months, I'd made like $6,000 in one single month in the retail season. And I thought, wow, I have everything figured out. I'm so smart. Of course, I fell down the roller coaster, and it was a ride along the way. But slowly, I built up skills and kept starting new things. Again, ups and downs. So there were successes and there were failures all along the way.
Tell us, and this is probably going to be maybe harrowing for you. We're going to take you back to that first. Do you remember what your first failure was that you actually were able to look back and actually say, hang on a minute, I really picked something up. I really learned something. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah. So funny enough, if you take a look over at my YouTube channel and some of the content on my website, you'll see there's a lot of stuff about keyword research. So ironically, the thing that I messed up on, the very first thing, was keyword research. So I hopped over to one of the Google tools which was available at the time, and I misinterpreted one of the columns in the results. And very specifically, some people will remember if you've been doing this for a little while, but it said competition low, and I thought that's good. The competition is low, and usually it's wide ranges, is low, medium, and high.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I don't want the high competition, but I was looking at the data that was meant for advertisers. So low competition in terms of an advertiser means that not many people are advertising there, and it is not a very profitable area because people don't even care. They're not even putting money into it as an advertiser. So I did the opposite of what I needed to do. I actually went after something that was not very popular, and I didn't realize that there was no money in it. It took me several weeks to figure that out. And then when I realized that, I had already committed to the specific niche in the website and the keywords. I was already writing content around that. And like I said, later I learned a lot about keyword research and became an expert in that area. But the very first thing I did was completely get it backwards.
It does feel very textbook of fail fast and fail fast, fail first, because I can't think of anything else that would have been a better lesson.
Right. And really, that was in that first 4 to 6 weeks. I watched a couple of videos and I was like, I see how the tool works. And then next thing I know, a few weeks later, I realized, oh, that column means something completely, it literally means the opposite of what I thought it meant. And if you look at the tools these days, it still has that data in the same way because the data is meant for advertisers, even though we as content creators use it in the opposite way.
A bit of a false start to begin with, and great, brilliant opportunity for learning. Going through the next kind of series of kind of failures and learnings and picking up pieces, was there a common theme as you went through and grew and certainly started, maybe not so much going into the YouTube, but certainly with the SEO and the keyword, becoming expert at that? Was there a theme that you started to pick up on that people were maybe not understanding or not missing out that actually you started to see a little bit more clearly?
I'm going to take the question in a little bit of a different area. And one thing that I did early on, which seems foolish at the time, and I wouldn't guide people to do this if they asked me, but I started my affiliate marketing blogs, and in parallel, after I got a little bit of success, I started a blog, Niche Site Project, so people could follow along with my journey, right? That is exactly what all the people I was following were doing. So Spencer Haws at Niche Pursuits, Pat Flynn, a couple other people, but those are the folks that really inspired me. So I thought, oh, I want to do that too. I want to share my journey. So first of all, when you split your time between two different projects or more projects, like many people do, you will make slower progress. You will as fast as you think, even though you're like, oh, I'm making progress in these different areas. It probably cut my progress trajectory by 50% at least. It made me more stressed out.
Right.
On the plus side, when I look back after about 10 years of doing this, I have an email list and a blog which is completely independent from SEO or algorithm issues or any specific platform like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or fill in the blank. Facebook groups are, very big now, but there was a time before, like 2013, 2014, where people had pages and they built their whole business around a Facebook page. And then all of a sudden, Facebook throttled that down, and you had to pay to even get in front of the audience that you built your whole business around. So very early on, this is something that has paid off over time, but it took 5 or 6 years for it to really pay off. And that is to make sure that I had a good foundation that was not so dependent on Google SEO traffic. It wasn't so dependent on any one thing. So when an algorithm update comes around, it's not that big of a deal to me because I have a lot of other things going on. But there's always trade-offs. So slower progress, but a stronger foundation. I think a lot of people miss that, or they misinterpret it, and they start 6 things at once, where they have their YouTube channel, they're trying to do social, they're trying to do all the social, they're trying to do LinkedIn, and they get a little scattered trying to do everything. Throw an email list in there and some copywriting, and if you don't have any help, it could be extremely stressful. So like I said, I took your question in a little bit of a different direction, but yeah, what do you think of that? Have you seen that in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, we are having a lot of conversations with people who are doubling down on particular platforms, and the danger, like you say, is that when algorithms change, that then they're at the mercy of whatever the platform is that they've invested in. Because you talk about a lot about diversification of traffic, and that certainly the more experienced creators seem to have absolutely embraced that. And double down on splitting that traffic. But it seemed to have been something that they've come to at a later point, unlike yourself, who started off that way.
And to add in there, so I did start, the pure SEO and affiliate sites, and then I had my blog. And over the course of 7 years, I added YouTube and then the podcast. So it wasn't everything at once. It was when I was ready to move on to the next step. The other thing that may actually answer the question from before is I focused on creating my own digital products from the very beginning, where, again, I'm not relying on a third-party affiliate program, which could be volatile or completely disappear. Occasionally that happens. And the margins, most people know, if you sell a digital product, the margins are awesome. And, the biggest payout that you may have to do is for affiliates, but they're selling more of your product. So highly recommend, figure out how to sell your own digital products, whatever it is. There's Etsy printables. I do online courses, but there's a lot of different ways to do it. But at that point, you control the traffic coming in, the funnel, wherever you've built your funnel, whether it's YouTube or a podcast or a blog or social or whatever. So you control that portion of it. And then you're also selling the product so that you don't have to worry about, running ads or other kind of stuff. Like I said,
so what was it
go away. Yeah.
What was it that made you decide that the timing was right to start with the digital courses? Because it is one of those topics that it seems a very well-known practice, but not well-practiced practice.
Well said. Funny enough, the real answer is, can we cuss here?
Absolutely.
Okay. I was just fucking delusional enough to think that I could do all of that stuff. I was smart enough to execute on it, but I was dumb enough to think that I could actually do it. And I think there's some, I'm sure there's some great quote. I should phrase it in my own words, but you have to be crazy enough to give it a shot, but smart enough to execute and follow through and pivot when you need to and all that kind of stuff. But I launched the blog within the Niche Site Project blog within 6 months of getting started, even learning about any of this stuff. In parallel, I sold an ebook, which was those were popular at the time, but it slowly grew into what was the course after a couple of iterations. But I wrote like a 100-page book. I pre-sold it. I just happened to be listening to a bunch of people talking about creating books, digital products, pre-selling it, that whole cycle. And I thought I could do it. So I started like right away. So the timing was just me being silly enough that I thought I could do it.
There is no, I can't think of a better reason to start anything other than just blind confidence.
Well, and the lessons along the way where I was like, if it doesn't work, at least I will know something at the end. And by pre-selling a product, which everyone should probably do in 90% of the cases for digital products, if you don't hit some threshold, which you could arbitrarily just pick before you get started, which mine was 10. If I didn't sell 10 ebooks, I wasn't going to do it. I would just refund the money and say, hey, I'll take a look. Either the price was off, or the product market fit was off, or something else was wrong, or the audience was wrong. So I was like, if I hit 10, I'll do it. And I sold 12. One person bailed out and 11 people got the book, and I was able to like launch it, take feedback from the initial pre-sale folks, and then iterate on it, take feedback, and then go from there.
I have to ask, is the ebook still available?
No, I think I'm trying to remember if I turned it into a lead magnet. A lot of it is completely inaccurate. So it'd be like reading a book about technology from the 70s or something like that, where they're talking about punch cards and, personal computers would be too expensive for people to have. Now we have like amazing supercomputers in our phone or our watches or whatever.
I'm not sure that there is actually a niche for retro technology updates.
Yeah.
So courses, great in terms of margin, but they are just one stream. They're not the only stream of income, the revenue that you've said you have. Can you talk us through a little bit around what your revenue streams look like and give a sense of what that diversified revenue stream looks like?
I will say, if you pick one of the revenue streams and just do that really well, you could just ignore the other ones. So especially if it's a digital product. So I would encourage people, don't get bogged down like, I have to diversify especially if you look at success stories on the learning platforms that are out there, like Teachable or Kajabi or whatever. Like if you do a good job, like you don't need to worry about any of the other streams of income. That said, because I do have a podcast and YouTube, there's the occasional ad placement. So I typically don't use AdSense. It's a really horrible way to monetize depending on your industry. Mine, where essentially I'm talking about the making money online area or personal finance, those are not paying out what I consider good. It's probably much higher because it's business focused and finance focused. It's probably higher than like a general audience. However, if you're selling your own products, it's so profitable that running just AdSense is kind of a joke, in my opinion. You have to have millions of views. So that said, occasionally I'll get an offer from a company that is a good fit for my audience, and I will either do like a direct ad sale where I'll say, hey, I use this product. It's a keyword research tool and it's really good. Maybe I do a demo with it. And if people sign up, I potentially get an affiliate commission. And then sometimes it's just a straight ad deal. Generally, I do prefer the straight ad deals if it's not a direct fit, because I don't really want to rely on their sales funnel to convert over. Some of them are great and they do convert really well, but at the same time, there's been a lot of products where I tested a lot just to see how my audience would react. And sometimes it's just a bad funnel, or they do a bad job, or it's not a great fit for the audience, but they'll pay a lot of money. So a quick example is, and I can give the specific example. It is actually, I won't say the company, but it's a very big company out of China, and they just offered a lot of money, and I was like, I'll give it a shot. And I told my audience, because I'm very transparent. So in a different show, I said, hey, this company paid like a huge amount of money. It's not a good fit. I told them it's not a good fit, and I think they just had a marketing budget from the parent company, and they were a third-party marketing company, and they were like, all right, we'll do it. We have to get these we have a budget. We have to get ads out there. And they paid me what someone with, say, like 1 million subscribers should get. And they paid me that. And they were like, you're way off the ad rate card. Like, this makes no sense. And I'm like, well, take it or leave it. It's up to you. So ads are pretty good if you have a good fit. And let me think if there's any other those are the main things. So affiliate deals and ad revenue. I've moved away from some of the affiliate marketing sites, but that was another big revenue stream. I've had a few exits selling sites, but as my interests just shifted, I stopped starting brand new sites.
How do you go around and choose whether they are a good fit? Obviously, you've got a really good idea of who your audience is. You understand who you're trying to reach. But how do you meet that middle ground of that really good, and the one you've just described is clearly an outlier. But for the majority, how do you select whether yes they're a good fit for your channel or for your audience?
I don't have a really strict set of guidelines. I get a lot of pitches, and if people have a channel or a podcast, you probably know you get 3 or 4 emails a day from somewhat legitimate sources. Sometimes they're scammy. I typically look to see if it's a product or service that I would actually use. I don't actually have to be using like that VPN service or whatever, but if it's something where I could see a value for a portion of my audience, even just 10 or 15%, I think that's okay. So one ad that I recently did is for a nootropic. So I take a nootropic. Sometimes it's a product that I've seen around. I've actually used it before, and I thought, hey, it's pretty good. And they emailed me, and it looked like a reasonable deal. I negotiated a little bit, and hopefully it'll work out for the long term. But like I said, there's probably 10 or 15% of my audience where they're actually interested in taking nootropics or supplements of some kind. A lot of people are not interested in that, but there could be a few that do become customers and that sort of thing. So very, listen to my gut, and I'm just like, would I use this product, and does it look professionally done, and will they be around? So one thing with software and other tools that I might recommend, I don't want to recommend some flash in the pan where someone is starting an AI content company, just a layer on top of ChatGPT or something like that. Yeah. And then they're just trying to sell it. And I know it's probably not going to be around in 6 months or a year, because there's a ton of those right now. And by if people listen to this in the future, maybe we've gone through that life cycle where, a lot of the cheaper, lower quality ones have just gone away. And there's a few prominent, good AI sources out there, good software. But I see this a lot on maybe like AppSumo, where someone does like a lifetime, or a company does a lifetime deal. People buy it because they don't want to miss out, and then the company goes under, or they change directions and pivot because it's not profitable in the way that they sold it, because on AppSumo you could sell a lot of stuff.
Lifetime deal is I've always found it to be a really interesting one. The software requires engineering. Lifetime deal is always I personally always shied away from any of those.
It's a bad idea. It's unsustainable for the company.
Going into a little bit more into the type of advertisers, how have you when you're polling not necessarily polling, but speaking to your audience and getting feedback from them, are there some that surprised you, that you either brought on as an advertiser and didn't expect to reach much of your audience, or others that were maybe ill received?
I don't work with very many advertisers, so okay. That's one thing that makes the endorsement more valuable, because even if it is mostly good, if I don't want to like promote that company for whatever reason, even if it's a petty reason, like, be honest, there's one person that I know that runs a software company, and they're just kind of a dick. I don't like them, and they have a bad reputation, and I'm not going to work with them because they have a bad reputation, and I could pick who I want to work with because I have the luxury of high margins on courses, basically. So I don't need the advertisers. So it allows me to be like really, really choosy, even though I don't have any specific rules. If I like the product, I'll promote it. Maybe even if they don't pay me or if it's not the terms that I want. So that said, I did think of one company where it did turn out kind of poorly at the end. So it was a content agency primarily, but they did some other marketing things. They advertised with me for a pretty long time, and they were doing well. After about a year or so, I think maybe they scaled too much and the quality of the content went down. And then about a year later, AI really exploded. And I think they lost about 75% of their ongoing revenue that they were counting on. And they had over 100 people working for them. They're actually based in the UK, so I guess the rules for employment are a little different. Here in the US, the company probably would have laid off people like
Yeah.
when they saw that things were not going to work out. But the company went bankrupt, and I don't know what happened, but basically the whole thing fell apart within like, I don't know, a couple months or something like that. So that one didn't work out great because I was still referring people to that company even after the ads ended, because, you know, it was a good price point, relatively decent quality. And then I started getting reports back that quality was going down. And a little bit after that, AI exploded the company. So that one didn't work out that great, but for a while was actually a good partner, and then it slowly degraded. So that's something I try to keep an eye on, is like the quality. So if I know some of my students or audience, they're working with a company, I ask them to tell me how the experience is, because if I do a test job or work with a company, they know it's me, so they're going to do a better job for
Yeah.
whatever interaction it is. Maybe I have, instead of working with a normal account manager, I'm working with like the CMO or something like that. So I don't get the proper experience. So I want to know what it's like for a person that just signs up, gets the service. What happens? Do they run into issues? Do they answer the emails right away? And then I can step in and say, hey, one of my referrals needs help. And then that gets action much faster. So that is one of the things to look out for.
You mentioned affiliate programs, as well as advertisers, and with the affiliate programs, yeah, some fly by night, appear and disappear, but there's some really long-standing ones. What I am curious to know is, what are some of the learnings that you've over being participating in different affiliate programs? What are some of the best takeaways that you think actually these are the things you wish you'd known before going into them?
So number one, like you mentioned, they can change. So Amazon is sort of the classic example. In 2017 and 2020, they changed the commission rates, and it was a dramatic effect. A lot of people went from, essentially they dropped by say 30 to 50% in revenue, like real bottom line revenue. So dramatic effect, and that can happen, right? You really can't do anything about it, especially with a big company like Amazon. If you send an email and you're upset about it, like, it's not going to move anything, right? There was a decision made and it changed that. The other thing is, when you are selling a lot of a product, you can go and try to negotiate a different deal with the company. Probably not Amazon, and this is probably not allowed by Amazon, but you can go to the actual manufacturer and try to renegotiate the deal in some capacity. So I haven't personally done this, but I've heard people say that they know that they're selling X number of product. They have data to back it up. They have the traffic. They have the analytics to show the company, and they can potentially get paid on the back end. After the month is done, they have a deal where maybe they get a little extra percentage or something like that from the direct company. Now, if the company has their own affiliate program, then it's much easier. You're not running the risk of violating the terms of some agreement along the way. but you can go and renegotiate. And if you have the data to back it up, then it's very clear that you have leverage and you can ask for a higher percentage. And you have to negotiate, you have to have the data, but if you have the leverage and you could refer people to a different product, like they very clearly understand that you can drive sales, you have traffic, and it could be in a different source, right? It could be on the YouTube side or Instagram or whatever. But if you have the traffic, if you have the audience, then you have leverage to renegotiate those deals. The other big thing is just remember that new management can change these agreements, right? So there's another company that I worked with, a lot of my friends really went all in on this specific affiliate program, and I didn't. It wasn't a big deal to me, so I wasn't pushing it, but some people spent, a year or two building up great recurring affiliate revenue, and then with some economic downturn and some changes in the industry, the company ended the program, shut it down for a little while, started a new one with basically different terms. So these folks that were earning essentially a full-time income from one affiliate source, it went away. It completely went away, and they only had about 3 or 4 weeks of a warning.
That's potentially catastrophic. That's definitely a word of caution and something to keep an eye open for, and definitely another vote in the camp for producing your own materials and selling your own courses.
Yep, and that's not to say that it's all bad, right? So the more money you're making from a single source, like it's great. Earn the money while you can, learn what you can. That's the biggest takeaway, is even if these projects don't end like you hope they would end, and you completely lose an affiliate program, you probably learned a lot of skills along the way that you could apply elsewhere. So it's not a complete loss, but the more money you're earning from one source or the more traffic, the more risk you hold in that one area. So potentially those are good times to diversify and take some of that revenue and try to start up another area. Like I said, after a few years, I thought I'm going to spend some time on YouTube and really try to do a good job there. And then a few years after that, I thought it's time to start the podcast.
What you do is partly for yourself, but then partly for your students who you mentioned. That requires a lot of learning, aggregating that learning, and then being able to synthesize it and kind of regurgitate it back out in a usable format. What does that process look like? How do you've mentioned analytics, you've mentioned making decisions based on your gut, but there's got to be something that sits behind how you take all the information that comes in, all your learnings, and then be able to actually make it usable.
My old job as a project manager required a lot of that type of work. So I didn't realize that I was learning anything useful at that old job, that old corporate job. It all felt like a waste of time. You're shuffling papers, doing the TPS cover sheets and all that kind of mess. But one thing that I got a lot of experience in was onboarding. So that requires understanding that someone's going to come in, start on the team, and they don't know what's going on. They don't know the systems, they don't know the processes or anything like that. So I became very good at writing up job aids, essentially step-by-step processes for different areas. And for whatever reason, I've been very good at that. And I guess maybe it is just through like sheer experience in doing it over and over again. So one thing that I try to remember is not to put in too much detail, put in just enough detail to get the job done, provide context. Maybe if it's necessary, you could add some of the details at the end of the job aid, but essentially a job aid would be what I could turn into a course or a YouTube video or whatever, where you're just showing a step-by-step process. one of the key things that I'm trying to do a better job with it these days is not only, being concise, but hopefully putting some story around it too. Or even if it's not a full story arc or anything like that, just have like a problem that you're introducing at the beginning and then provide the solution and maybe some other details. But it's a lot more memorable. And from a content production standpoint, you could hook people and get them to listen to your story. Whereas, there's some podcasts that I've heard, for example, that they are very short, they're very punchy, they have no personality. It's like someone read like a blog, like a listicle type blog post, and I see they get a lot of downloads. They're short episodes. I think people feel like they're productive when they're listening to them, but they don't do anything with it because it's just there's nothing there other than like the list of information. So when possible, I think it's great to add some story or at least your own personal experience, which that should be, the easiest and most authentic for people to provide to their audience. And then otherwise, from a course production perspective, we often want to provide everything. We want to have the full flagship transformational course, which is overwhelming, both to produce and for the student to go through. So it can be good to take more of that information out and create another smaller course that maybe stands alone. Maybe it's meant to be taken after some of the other content. But overall, like the theme is like, don't put too much in. It's very easy to make it overwhelming because there's way too much information in a course or even in a video or something like that.
Okay, thank you. And the project management, I do wonder with that background if that plays on how so I would describe your approach as slightly, and please don't think I mean this negatively, but slightly removed from the causality of what you're actually engaged in, and very aware but actually quite philosophical, if you will. Do you think the project management experience that you had, do you think that plays into how now you can take that like 30,000 foot view and look at your business through those eyes?
I think so. Yeah, good observation. I think so. And from the project management and consulting perspective, where maybe you're hired to do something in an industry that you don't know anything about. So you ask questions, you interview people, you try to figure out what's going on, where are the bottlenecks, where are the issues, how does this normally work, how should it work, where do you want it to be in the future, like all those kinds of ideas. You have to go, really high level view, and then you have to go really deep into the details. So yeah, 100%. Also from the philosophical thing, and I took no offense at all. Yeah, I'm detached, right? So one other thing that we haven't covered at all is I want this whole thing to be sustainable for very long term. So literally to the detriment of like using best practices. The thing is, a lot of YouTube creators out there that we watch probably have some video about, hey, I'm taking a break, I'm getting burned out, something in that area, like mental health break. And I really haven't had to do that, or I kind of self-imposed it and didn't feel the obligation to keep creating content for YouTube. The thing, especially with YouTube and some of the other social platforms, you get so much data. And basically, if you produce more content and you cater to the algorithm, pander to the algorithm, then you get more views, you get more subscribers. But that will drive you insane. And it's not a healthy thing. In my opinion, people can do what works for them. But generally, people hit some kind of portion of burnout. So if someone was curious, you could go look at my channel where there's I think there's 15 or 1700 videos or something like that. You could see where I produced, weekly videos like made for YouTube. And then probably a couple years ago, 2021, I decided I'm just going to publish long form interviews where I'm publishing what I want and I'm doing it how I want. And I don't care about the best practices for doing YouTube videos. Growth dropped off, views dropped off. But I
Yeah.
knew it was going to happen. But again, the point is sustainability. So I want to do this for a long time. And that's one great thing with podcasts is you don't have all that data that you see all the time. You go into your YouTube dashboard, you see, what did your last video do? Is it better or worse than the last 10? All this
Yeah.
stuff trying to encourage you to produce more content. And I'm trying to play my own game, which I don't even know how to describe the game, but the game doesn't take into consideration a lot of the YouTube analytics and best practices because I want to create the content that I'm interested in. Otherwise, I'm just creating videos because it's a good keyword or something like that, which I don't necessarily want to do.
It sounds really a very balanced approach to take a self-driven rather than a reactive approach to kind of delivering on that content wheel.
You could see some examples of this. I can't remember the creators where one or two of their videos in a specific area did really well. And then you fast forward 1 year later where they followed the metrics, they're creating videos about something that they don't really care about. And now they're the person that does videos on X. And I didn't want to end up in that spot. Again, it doesn't take into consideration best practices. It only if it fits with, like you said, the content that I'm driving, that I want to produce.
And I don't think it's probably quite so far as I was watching Rick Rubin and talking around how the audience doesn't matter. And I don't think it's quite that far, right? I absolutely believe it. Certainly, our clients are important. Our audience is super important. But I think the idea makes sense that actually doing it for the aim of delivering a quality product is more important than anything else.
Yeah, you can't alienate your audience, right? Like you have to have some consideration, but
yeah,
you have to find the Venn diagram overlap where you could produce the content that works for you and hopefully works for your audience. And if it doesn't happen to work for your audience currently, hopefully there are people out there that you can pull in. So that's one of the things where I'm going to be experiencing this coming up, where I'm shifting some of my focus from niche sites and affiliate marketing. The industry has changed over the last 10 years, where I'm talking about some higher level ideas, which hopefully the audience is coming along. Like that's where the industry is shifting, and I could still straddle the line, right? Luckily, I have a lot of friends and peers that are still in the niche site and affiliate marketing area, and I could chat with them, bring them on as experts. So I'm interested in the topics, but I'm not interested in creating or executing those niche sites or the specific kind of business model that we were doing before, like a decade ago. So again, I've just kind of moved on to other things.
I have to ask then, you've got your eyes set on something, sounds mysterious, interesting, obviously much bigger things. Are you in a position to share that with our audience?
This will make me really committed to do it, because I haven't shared it very much, Lee. So
well, great. We are happy to be your accountability partner.
All right, perfect. Yeah, there's nothing better than having like many thousands and thousands of people. Hey, what about the new thing you're working on? Okay, so I'll rewind just a little bit. I started my own podcast in 2019. Love the format, love audio. I publish it on YouTube as well. I think at this point in time, those kind of go hand in hand. In 2021, I started a podcast with a friend of mine who I happened to interview for my original show. We hit it off. We had a great time. It was perfect timing for him. And I asked him, hey, do you want to start a show with me? So we started a show called Mile High Fi about 2 years ago. So that's done well. It's in the personal finance and financial independence space. So I like podcasting. I like starting new things. And I've done a couple of these, so I feel confident about starting another one. And I don't know, I can't get it out of my head. So I do talk a lot about SEO, and I have a lot of friends who are experts in SEO. And I know there's a market out there, and I know there are SEO podcasts, but I want to get into some of the advanced topics that don't necessarily fit on my original show called The Doug Show. And I was like, I can start a new show. There's a couple pieces here, Lee, so I'll lay it out. So one, I was like, I could start a new show focused on essentially SEO and marketing. I could put it on YouTube. I could have a podcast. Maybe I could work with some advertisers, let people know that I am starting, a new entity, and it'll be out there. Because I do have an audience in my email list, an niche site project, all the stuff that I mentioned before, I have the ability to have people come along for the journey and have like a little bit of a workshop where they pay to launch their own podcast. We'll meet weekly, that sort of thing. So they'll get to watch in real time like what I'm doing. I think it'll probably be about 10 or 12 weeks or so. The hard part with that is people's schedules do need to line up. So that may be a flop. Like that's something I'm actually like nervous about, where if someone's not ready to do that, maybe it's just like a month off, but if they're not ready, they're not going to be able to enroll and go along on the journey. So that could be a bust, but I'm going to try it anyway. It's one of those things where even if I fail, at least I tried it. If 2 or 3 people come along on the journey, like that's enough to have like a cohort and have the accountability to work together while we're all launching the show. The other crazy thing is I see a lot of companies out there trying to start podcasts, and they are varying levels of success. I'll say it that way. The point being, there's a lot of people that want to start podcasts. And I thought if I start one in the SEO area, kind of high level, that would be a perfect podcast to potentially sell in the future. And I would probably do, the full package. Like I said, you got the podcast and the audio side, you have a YouTube channel. I would do an email list. Those are the things I'm good at. So I would probably just keep it at that and potentially sell this new entity in say 6 to 12 months or so. So kind of get it going, get it started, and then hopefully sell it to a company.
That's really exciting because I think there is a lot of sense in terms of getting up momentum, almost like a flywheel, and actually being able to hand that over to a business that can actually make the most of it and then take it from, whatever level it is, and then grow on the back of that. And that point of inertia, I think, is a real challenge. The desire, super high desire for businesses to, and part of it is because everyone's inundated, right? Everyone's inundated by all of this content, and there's a real desire for people to be involved and contribute and have a business in front. But that initial point of how do we get from like 0 to 1, that's difficult. I can see the real value in it.
Yeah. What issues do you see with it? So I've told a couple other friends about this, but in everyone, you got to be careful trying to get advice from your friends because they'll say, oh, that's a great idea. But these are other business folks. But Lee, what do you think? Poke some holes in this idea.
I suppose detaching, maybe it's a bit of a callback from earlier, but detaching yourself from the actual podcast, I think is part of the challenge. So avoiding becoming the personality within it. It obviously isn't going to be a Doug show. That one you're permanently attached to. I see that as a real challenge. And I also think there's an element of tone that is probably the more specific in terms of tone and the identity of a brand. Super important in terms of connecting to their particular audience. So I would see that might be a little bit of a hurdle. Not something that can be overcome. I think it's for the right type of business and the types of business who would be considering it, I think will probably have a higher risk tolerance and a greater appetite for creativity and exploring new ideas. So I I think that in itself comes with a little bit more flexibility. But it does sound absolutely exciting. I think there does feel like there's a market for it. I think probably the other challenge that I do see is explaining to businesses the new concept, because it's not out there currently. It's not something that people are able to see in their everyday lives. So trying to explain how that would benefit and where that would fit in and what that transition would look like is probably one of those key pieces. And then maybe identifying who the people are within the organization who would be onboarded into the podcast.
Great points. And yeah, I think you're 100% right. That's something where I thought, should I get a host to just host it so I'm detached from it, so it can be actually a full package, including the host. But then I thought there's a strong chance that the founder of whatever the company is or one of the marketing folks would actually want to do the podcast. So I think there's a lot of ways to try to solve it. There is an issue there, and one way I think would be to just have like some transition time where either they pay me to be a co-host for whatever, 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever, to transition it over, so it's not an abrupt just all of a sudden there's a new host on there like, hey, sold the show, I'm out of here. And the other part is I'm hoping the potential buyer will be an advertiser, right? So that's the natural progression. They're like, this is a great audience, we would like to get in front of that audience. And then I would say, well, you could just buy the whole show. You could take the whole thing. But that's a big piece that I don't know how that'll work exactly. And going back to a previous point, I will probably get advertisers early on from hopefully episode 1. And in that way, it will be a profitable project right off the bat. And there is, a case where maybe someone doesn't have an agency, but they want to get into podcasting, and it would be a turnkey situation where they have advertisers that they are working with. There's an email list already, and they can maybe promote as an affiliate other products out there. So even if it doesn't quite work out, there's still like a piece that could work. If that doesn't work, I think I can just take the concepts and fold it back into my original podcast, The Doug Show, and just go from there. And we'll get a good story. I could tell people, hey, I tried to do this thing and it didn't work. Here's my lessons learned. The crazy thing is, like, when you are producing content, even if it doesn't work out, you still have a story to tell, and you can go to conferences and say, hey, I tried to start a podcast and sell it and it didn't work. Here are the 10 lessons I learned. And then you could tell your sad story about how you failed, and people will learn from it probably more than if I had a success story. But I do want it to work, by the way.
It does seem like you've thought through enough that there's very little downside.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm still scared.
It's I know you talked about like some of the challenges you think you'll face, but you've just said scared. What is it in particular you think you're going to face that'll be different on this one?
It's the same stuff, like I will most likely run into some issues, like trying to get some advertisers to work with me on a brand new show, right? So the companies may be a little tight with their purse strings. The part that really scares me more is the cohort, the workshop that can go along with me. It'll be like high interaction for me. It'll be a lot of helpful info and coaching for the people going through it. But like I said, the timing really has to work out, and it's a certain kind of person that wants to start a podcast and take a course to go along, follow me on the journey, and see how I'm doing things on a week-to-week basis. So I think the workshop portion is the part that I'm a little more scared about, because let's say I try to launch it around this time of the year, which is December, people are on holiday mode. Like they're not thinking as much about next year. So I'm debating a little bit, and it may be one of those things where just like the first time that I launch that ebook, I will pre-sell it, and there's a chance that I won't hit the threshold that I've arbitrarily chosen, and I'll just refund the money and say I'm not doing the cohort thing. I'm just launching the show, and maybe on the other side of it, I'll create a course, something like that. So I'm just scared that people aren't going to like it. Just the same old stuff, right? I'm afraid people aren't going to buy. I'm afraid it's not going to work.
What's your timeline look like?
Wow, you're really trying to get the accountability. Nice. I think so. The soonest that it would be, and potentially like the best case type of scenario, would be to launch it at the beginning of the year. Beginning of the year, people are like, "Oh, what new shows are out there?" It's a new beginning, and it would be really cool to do that. And I think it's possible. I have outlined the type of launch that I would want to have, and I think I potentially want to have like 20 shows at the launch where I publish them all at once, with about 4 or 5 long form interviews with SEO or marketing experts. And then the other episodes would be short form. I think there's some advantages to do the short form where they're just a solo episode. I go through, and they would be, say, 8 to 15 minutes. Those are kind of a perfect length for the YouTube side. And from the audio side, people potentially would download all of those episodes right away, which is great from an algorithmic perspective for both Apple Podcast and Spotify. So while that would be a lot of work, I can definitely produce 20 shows in the next several weeks and actually launch. When you put that on top of potentially trying to sell the workshop, it does make it more complicated, and there's some marketing behind that. So I would say either the 1st of January or the 1st of February. There's nothing wrong with getting started in February. So I might make it a little easier on myself. But I would say in the next couple months here, in the first quarter for sure of 2024.
Brilliant. Well, definitely let us know when you know what that date's going to be. And we'll absolutely, we'll put our Geniuslink weight behind it.
Awesome. Yeah. I was going to say I'll hopefully be able to call in favors all across my network to help out on this little one. But I appreciate that, Lee.
Oh, definitely. It's the least I could do. So you have been super, super generous with your time. So there's only a couple little quick questions that I've got for you just to round this out. We talked about affiliate programs. We talked about revenue. But one of those things that all content creators find themselves in is talking about gear. So I'm curious to know, what's that one piece of equipment, that one piece of gear that you absolutely cannot live without?
I love this microphone that I'm using. I have 3 of them. It's a Shure MV7. So it has an XLR input and it has a USB input as well. And I have it for my bigger podcast set back there so I could have a few guests. And it's a fantastic microphone. I get compliments on it often. Secondary, I'll cheat and I'll give 2. The lens that I'm using here is a Sigma 18-35 1.8, and it's a relatively cheap camera body. It's a Canon, but I have a bunch of Canon other bodies over here, but this one's up permanently, and the lens makes my whole set look amazing. It's a great lens, kind of expensive, but totally worth the extra dollars.
Brilliant. Thank you. And what about that one piece of kit that you had your hopes on, but just didn't come through in the end, that let you down?
I've been pretty lucky. I haven't had any major issues with gear. I typically stick with, like I said, the Canon lenses and bodies and all that stuff. I have a couple of Shure microphones, and everything's relatively good. I have Zoom gear for like my mobile recording whenever I need to, take it on the road or go to a conference or anything like that. So knock on wood, I've had very good luck and no major issues, but I'm sticking to kind of higher end gear, good brands. I do buy almost everything on eBay because people typically don't throw around their $1,000 lenses or $300 microphones. They're in pretty good shape. So I would recommend, people, if you're okay with using eBay to get your gear, it's going to be in pretty good shape most of the time.
Brilliant. Thank you. And where can our audience find you after this?
You can go to dougcunnington.com. There's links to all the stuff I'm working on, but I'll direct you specifically. There's a personal finance and financial independence a podcast, but it's both on podcast and on YouTube. It's called Mile High Fi. And then if you are interested in the SEO and the affiliate marketing and keyword research and general digital marketing, my YouTube channel, it's just Doug Cunnington. That's where I would head for that stuff. And do sign up for the email list if you're interested in, learning a little bit more and being aware of any of the new content that I'm publishing. And you can sign up over at Niche Site Project. But there's a lot of stuff. I'm sure you'll link up to it.
Absolutely. We definitely will. Thanks again. You've been an amazing guest, and best of luck. We are definitely looking forward to seeing that launch.
All right. Thanks, Lee. Appreciate it.